Welcome, everybody. Joined today here with McGilla Gorilla, Paper Cop, Bleach Side, and Reality Check. Uh, Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. Uh, well, I really didn't even know where to start talking, but might as well start off with everybody else talking about because it's a talk of the town in the community, and this is the Zellner's bombshell and setup of the state. They She caught him slipping 100%.
Yep, they were caught with their pants down, that's for sure.
Uh,
Well, they're still wishing the new date away, which is pretty much their MO.
well,
Yeah.
for those of you that haven't read the brief that just got dropped out today, basically she went over everything that she's talked about in the last prior briefs, and she brought up that the state is now saying that she replied without the permission to, but she also points out that this is the third time she's done this, and the other previous times they didn't do this. So why are they trying to delay even more?
Well, it's
and not
Manitowoc.
and not just
They
and not
change
just
the rules
that,
as they go.
but the case law they cite has no bearing on on the motion at all.
Exactly. She also states that too in the filing she just dropped today. Now, the state doesn't have a chance to respond at all. They're done. So it's going to come up to the Court of Appeals to make their decision and what's going to happen. You think they're going to do the right thing and send it back to the circuit court?
Yeah, that's really a tough one. I can't imagine that they would, affirm the state's motion to strike because it doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough to figure how they're going to view this new particular piece of information. I mean, to me it seems like this is just as big as the bones and just as big as the CD.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the courts, and we've been wrong before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not supposed to consider the new evidence until the circuit court has ruled on it. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in terms of whether they're going to remand or not.
Mm-hmm.
right. So her argument was that since it was contested, they must remand. So
Yeah. Well,
if
they
the state didn't contest it, then they could rule on it.
well
Good
they
point.
thought she didn't have any evidence to back what she was claiming, and they were caught with their pants down.
But that should be argued at the circuit court. It shouldn't
Correct.
be argued in front of appeals. So,
But like I said, all the other times she's done the same thing, and she responded to what they responded to. They didn't attest it, but now they are.
No, I can't fathom a reason why the state took this position. Because all the other things were just as bad, and they didn't. I mean, they had an issue with them before, but this time around, it just felt. I think I mentioned on somebody else's live a couple of days ago that it seems like the state is hanging off the edge of a cliff, grasping in a vine, trying to hang on for dear life. That's what it feels like.
Or like Paul says, they're holding on to the balloon, and it's too late to let go.
Yeah.
But her affidavit of the Sowinsky guy, what do you guys make of it? McGilla, you first.
okay, well, I guess there's new information that's developed that's improved the credibility of that witness's statement. We have the background information from Zellner, but also Teresa went out and actually found some footage that shows that there is a ditch exactly where he was saying. Some people were trying to argue it was flat, and he really didn't need to go into a ditch, and he used the word ditch, and they were arguing that wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
There is a ditch. some people are arguing they can actually see tire tracks at the location he gave.
I myself have started going over old nude footage too. Flyer video is no help. I've looked with frame through frame. They don't even get anywhere close to that location. So,
the news footage they showed wasn't crystal clear, but it certainly looked like those were tire tracks.
Oh, I agree too.
Well, it looked like tire tracks going pretty far away from Avery Road. You know, not just going a little bit off.
Well, when they posted that other screenshot of the level, being on street level, that ditch was pretty steep, and you know, I think it was Barb. They kept trying to say that was flat. Well, yeah, that's nowhere near flat.
No.
Oh, that was Barb?
It's definitely
Barb said that.
drivable.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing I mentioned is, you know, we got to keep in mind, this is also at 1 or 2 in the morning. So it's pretty darn dark. He's going by headlights. And you know, as anybody who's ever done land nav at night, it's very difficult to gauge distance at night. So the swerve off the road could have been greatly exaggerated because there's no depth perception. So that doesn't throw me off that the swerve was so far out.
No, it's just it might not be the right track as well.
No, that's possible too. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're looking, did it really affirm him? But his story's holding up better than
now
people
he just
thought.
got to confirm that he's seen the individuals he claimed he's seen.
Right. So if you actually look at what Zellner provided, she had the Herald Times celebration for news carriers for 2005 and 2006. So she showed that he was working for them that full year too, which
yeah, and I think it was Kirby also verified the date because apparently Sowinsky only worked those Saturdays, which of course could have only.
That's a mistake. He actually said he worked every day, but he went and did the deliveries earlier on Saturdays.
Oh, okay.
So on the other days it would have been later in the morning. But I think I heard that misstated once during the marathon we had.
Oh, okay.
Well, for me, the telling part is the interview that's done with the spring tubes within
the next day.
What, 24 hours? Yeah. And for some reason, it's brought up. We don't know if it's because they're questioned or if they just bring it up on their own, but the delivery of the Herald Times. Why?
I don't know.
Unless they ask them to clarify because they did get a phone call.
Yeah,
doesn't seem like much of a reason.
It's possible that they actually shared that phone call and did some things about it, but it was the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office, so they just never made a report about it. And if nothing came of it, they'd easily forget it. You know, it's possible
for about 8 years.
You know,
until they need it. Well, maybe we better document that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is that going to be their what they feel their saving graces is because Walter Springtube said, well, we get it at 9:30. I'm sorry, if somebody says they get it at 9:30, okay, you need to clarify. Are you going out to your box at 9:30 and getting it? Or is it actually delivered at 9:30?
That's the problem with all these DCI reports. They don't have the questions they asked the people. They just have a rendition of what they answered. This person said this person said this, and then they said this. It's just like Bobby Dassey's interviews. It's the same way. There's a reason for it.
Well, it's just that the reason they'd be discussing it at all. What Sowinsky said is every day he delivers a paper in time to get home, give his kids breakfast, and take them to school. So he's saying he delivered papers before 9:30 every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's not clear that Springstube would be on his route. We don't really know what his route was.
Well, Walter Spring Tube was the house at the end of Avery Road.
Yes.
It was the house that used
No,
to
he was the White Cedar Lane, isn't he?
No,
No.
that's
Oh,
the
that's-
other spring tubes.
Oh, there's 2 spring tubes. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is Manitowoc.
That's
There's 2 or
the
3 of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for
Yeah.
instance, did you guys know that Leo? You know who Leo Richmond is, right? He's the
Yeah,
one that
he's-
called, stated that a lady looking like Teresa Halbach was knocking on his door.
Oh yeah.
But that turned out to
he's
be
actually Chuck Avery's grandson's stepfather.
well, but he was actually
Well,
talking to like Judy.
Yeah, but
Springs,
if you read the DCI report of them talking
Sapper.
to him, he gives a completely different description of the person that he says on the phone call. He says she had red hair. Well,
Yeah.
we don't know what he said because again, it's a rendition of what they say took place.
Absolutely, they're not a reliable.
The more information
Sure.
that comes out, why are there more questions than answers?
Yeah, well, yeah. On the whole case, forget just this one thing.
Yeah, just the whole case in general.
What's your thoughts,
Billy?
Ringside?
I'm gonna jump in here real quick. You need to thank Natasha. She just
I've seen it. I said thanks.
oh, okay. I didn't hear you.
Thank you. Not necessary, but I appreciate it. But go ahead, Fleaside. Your thoughts?
No,
But can't hear you.
You're muted.
Nope, can't hear you yet.
He must have another agenda.
He's getting tips.
He's got Wiegert on the phone.
Yeah. Or Fassbender, one of the
How do I get out of this one?
Oh, they like sending emails.
He's waiting for something.
I can see the state having some outs on this, even if it does get to a hearing, because you've got Sowinsky saying, "I saw this," and in Zellner's affidavit, he kind of explains how he comes to that conclusion, how he figures out it was Bobby, et cetera, et cetera. But his previous statements, because they don't quite fit that, the state can really clamp onto that and use that as a reason to say, well, this isn't reliable because over here he had no idea who saw, et cetera, et cetera. But the other out they have is even if we take Sowinsky as perfectly credible, he saw what he saw, they can still get Bobby out of the picture by just saying, well, Bobby was home asleep, so it couldn't have been Bobby.
But the thing was, I think
based on Bobby's work schedule, he wouldn't be sleeping.
No, Bobby wouldn't be sleeping, but that was his night off. But
I worked the
If
same,
I remember
damn near
hearing
the same
it-
shift as him. I get off of work.
you don't want to sleep. But that was his night off. And where was he the night before when they asked him?
He was with Steven.
He was with the night before when
On
he
the
comes
4th?
back. They found the Rab. Where was he? Mike O's.
Oh yeah,
He was because he was with Steven when Chucky said he saw the headlights over by his place.
Mhm.
So Steven and Bobby went to go check that out. I forget what time that was. I think he said it was
around 7.
6-ish or 7-ish, wasn't it? Yeah.
7:20.
Yeah, and then he
Yeah.
called him back 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
7:20 was the phone call.
Yep, that's correct.
But of course, that's all we know about that. We don't know where Bobby was the rest of that night. But I'm just trying to think of an avenue the state is going to try to use.
But that's all arguing the evidence. That should be at the
Right.
circuit court. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And this is all going on. KZ getting a hearing, and since this is going back to Judge Suck at this, I don't see that happening. I see her denying it.
Mhm.
She'll drag her heels probably for 3 or 4 weeks, and then she'll just deny it outright and kick it back to the.
Yep.
the
Yeah, but
COA.
then the Court of Appeals will give a ruling that would include this evidence for the,
Right.
and that's what Zellner wants. She thought this was important enough to delay the ruling from the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Well, it's like when she filed that motion and asked Judge Suck to recuse herself. And she had other things that were in that brief too, but Judge Suck spent more time on why she shouldn't be than the other things. Like her giant motion where she's asking to retest everything.
Yeah.
Quickest denial ever. But then other one, she took forever to make a decision.
Yeah.
It's like a chess match, I swear.
Well, the state dragging it out is just one of their strategies, and then they think by blaming Zellner every chance they got for dragging it out, they're getting some cover. But until we hear
you, Fleetside. No, can't hear you.
until we hear from the Court of Appeals on something significant, we just don't know if they're going to get a fair hearing there or not.
You figured out his audio issue?
No, he's still working on it.
Go, leave, and come back.
Unplug the computer.
That usually fixes.
turn it on, turn it back off.
That usually fixes the problem. Thank you, Jamie. You didn't have to do that. And
So,
Natasha didn't have
Magilla,
to do
I'm
that.
curious I'm kind of curious as to where you stand with your theory now, because I've watched your theory evolve.
Well, I think if this turns out to be not credible, then I mean the evidence from the dog tracks was definitely pointing at Ryan, and I still think the thing we were finding is that probably people, if they walked in cremains, could leave a track that Loof would follow. So there were definitely trails. It looks like Loof might have been following cremains. But I think a lot of the other tracks are probably still Ryan, but it probably ties into what happened Thursday night when he was there with the phone calls after the failed flyover. None of those things tie into proving Ryan actually had a confrontation with Teresa. Which, and we really don't have a whole lot of evidence saying Bobby did. I mean, the first thing that really gives us evidence of somebody having a confrontation with Teresa is Sowinsky. And that's why I've been focusing so much on developing a theory for Bobby. We really know very little of what Bobby was doing on the first and the second.
It's because we don't have a detailed.
Well, there was no investigation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
But there was this one table I found that showed all his calls for 10 days leading into, I think, or it was more than 10 days. It led into the November 9th, starting at October 24th. And I did find one phone number that we really haven't tracked to ground, and it was 26 calls he made to a person named, I tracked it down, it's Jason R. Dvorak.
Stephanie Dvorak?
No, Stephanie Dvorak's his mother, and I'm pretty, and he's the exact same age as Bobby.
Well, Stephanie went to school with him.
Well, there's a Stephanie with an F that's
right.
The younger sister of Jason. She's 1 year younger. And then there's a Stephanie with a PH who's their mother, who the phone line's registered to. So the phone line goes to the mother's name. But I was thinking, does this guy really have a steady girlfriend that he's talking to 26 times? And it doesn't fit any of the profile data we have. He doesn't have a steady girlfriend. He's talking to the brother. Also, when I looked up information on the brother, during the investigation in 2006 in the court case, he decided to join the Marines. And, you know, he was off to basic training somewhere. So, and he comes back and he's moved into what was his mother's house. And now he has a 2010 black RAV4 in his driveway. How's that feel? And then the location of their property is 4 miles away from the Averys to the west. And they're officially in Whitelaw.
Yep.
It's a little Twilight Zone for me.
And
Well, 26 phone calls the week of the crime and nothing the day of it. No phone calls to him the day of the crime. So,
well, we don't know about the messengers on MSN either.
Why is there no text message data for Teresa Halbach's phone?
Oh, well, I was trying to figure out from the computer reports if they were recovering the Messenger and Internet Explorer history from deleted file space, or if that was still in the file space and the applications were still working. It's if you reformat the drive, but you don't run an image restore or a deep delete, you can recover a lot of the data from the deleted file space.
Yep.
So we don't really have enough of either Gary Hunt's or Veli's report to see where they're finding this data. They just give us summary reports of the results of it. Some of the files, they tell us that it was in a lost files list, which meant it was in deleted file space after they ran a scanner that restored all the files in the deleted file space.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that information is available to Zellner, but all we have is 4 small parts of it that she put in her filings. Also, some of what Gary Hunt did is very misleading. He did a search for the word body and said there's 1,000 references to the word body on the drive. But every HTML file has two instances of the word body in it, because the body section is where the main content of an HTML file is, and there's a start body and end body tag. So that was very misleading. And a lot of their report was just showing all these HTML files containing the word body, but it's irrelevant. So if we could get more details from that scan, I think there's probably a lot more information there.
Well, I think for me the important piece of that was just the sheer volume of the searches, what the searches comprised of, and the content nature of those searches. I think for me that's enough, because no normal person is going to be conducting those types of searches at that volume. I mean, we've all looked up stuff that is, that would be weird or, really outlandish.
Like Rodden.com.
But not like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't.
Well, have you seen Faces of Death? Everybody's what? Jesus.
Well, maybe when we say we guys.
Yeah, there you go.
But we're wired a little differently, and it's not always good. I'll give you that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what tells me that there's something. I'll use the term wrong. There's something wrong with Bobby. I don't know what that is, but between that and the chat logs we did have about the stuff he was talking to people about, the kind of subjects he was bringing up, that's not normal. None of that is normal.
No, like referencing Saw had just came out.
Yeah.
It just came out.
Right, and it's a very scary movie from the perspective of the victims. I mean,
oh hell yeah.
So he was identifying with the attacker.
Yeah.
and like pretending he was the attacker to these girls, and I just I think that's enough to say that he needs to be investigated.
Yes.
But it's still very circumstantial when we're talking a confrontation with Teresa.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sowinsky is the first time we have something that says, you know, he was handling this car before the police found it. If that's true, you know, he goes up from being maybe 50-50 with Ryan, or a little, I had Ryan ahead, to he's probably 90% likely to be the one if Sowinsky is credible. And I mean, we know he was delivering papers. We know that must have been on his paper route. So he was driving there every day. Also, some of the things he said he didn't mind being in the public eye. He's moved to Colorado, so he's not, you know, scared of being intimidated by the police that live around him anymore. So
also, him stating that he had no idea about a reward would be true because he doesn't live in Wisconsin where those billboards were posted in Two Rivers. Only the people in that community seen that billboard. Unless you're following KZ on Twitter, you wouldn't know nothing about this.
Right. Yeah, I think that was.
So then, how do we get to the realization of how he reached out to Zellner? How do we get from that point? Because he said that he did it in 2005.
Well, from my understanding,
and then how did it get to Zellner? His
emails are in the filing. So he had an email to Buting, I think, or it was in right after Making a Murder came out, and it was in there.
Yeah, I think she's talking about it right now. Didn't he make some kind of reference to having watched Ma'am 2, and that's how?
Yeah. So then he has a second set of emails.
Too. Okay.
Yeah. He wrote to Stephen Avery lawyers. You know the.
Yeah, and in that email, he states that he's seen two individuals pushing a car, and it's not Brendan Dassey.
It's not Brendan, right?
Yes. You know how small. Are you able to talk now?
Oh.
Not yet. Nope.
Can you mime?
It's T1.
Can you write?
He's trying.
I don't understand.
So here's a question I have. I haven't found anywhere yet that we have made or established there being a connection between Ryan Hillegas and that crew and the Avery Dassey family.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any connection between those two?
Not that I've found.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's found, even Mystic. I don't think Mystic has found any connection between those two. So here's kind of my main problem with this whole case and kind of how it has to evolve, or how we're having to figure it out. There's three groups: the RH group with Blodorn and the kittens and all those folks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have law enforcement, and that's MTSO, CASO, and DCI, and then whatever elements of state leadership were playing a part in there. And then you have the Avery Dassey family. The only thing that we have right now that connects the RH group and the family group is law enforcement. Now, I can't bring myself to the concept of law enforcement having committed this murder. I can't get there. Are they capable of it? They probably could, but did they? I don't know. That might be a stretch for me. So trying to figure out how we get from the killer somehow connecting to law enforcement, and law enforcement making a concerted effort to conceal the killer by doing all the planting. That's where I'm getting lost, because whether the killer's in RH's group or in the Avery Dassey family, where did the other group come into it? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I never think of law enforcement as one group. So I have a group I call the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office's cadre, or role players. And I think that's maybe 5 people. And then most of the Calumet Sheriff's Office, I think, is honest people. And then I think Fassbender and Uyghur crossed a couple lines late in the case.
Think?
Yeah, but I don't think they had anything to do with the planning of the evidence. I think that's all the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office's rogue group.
Well, they definitely had. They definitely had hands in concealing evidence.
Why
I mean,
is- why is-
Doris's interview and the CD as well.
Why is Mark
Yeah.
Uyghur constantly changing the schedule so he can keep certain people on the property? There's a time the officer calls in. He was like, "Hey, I just switched shifts with this guy, but I realized that the rookie is going to be following him, and if we switch shifts, he can't follow me. Why not? Wouldn't it be you're training somebody?"
Yeah, and that's kind of where my problem comes in from a law enforcement perspective. So you have the group of people, whoever they were, or however many there were of from Manitowoc, that have, in whatever manner they did, established the plan for the framing. Now, because of the whole, quote unquote conflict of interest, we know we're having to bring in this second agency, Calumet, to come, quote unquote, run the investigation. Now, if I'm one of those planters, and I'm going to have these other cops coming around to find or work the evidence that I'm about to plant, I have to be extremely confident that these guys are not going to, that they're going to play along with what I'm doing, because the way the evidence was planted and the way the evidence was and not collected correctly, any actual honest cop would have looked at that and said, wait a minute, why aren't we taking pictures here? Where's the video? Why aren't we roping this off? Why aren't, an honest cop's going to be asking all these questions. So that group of planners has to be supremely confident that the other officers from Calumet and even the DCI folks coming in are going to play along.
So
how does that happen?
Most likely, it would have to be law enforcement planting things because, Ryan and Scott were led on the property on the 7th, and then they start finding everything after that.
Well,
So
the key was definitely
the key was planted by Link. Link planted the key. That's my thing. He had it in his pocket and he dropped it there, and then goes, "Oh, look, a key."
But Kucharski did push back some, and when he testified, he did not strongly say it wasn't planted. He's the CASO officer that was in the room.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Sitting on the
like
bed. Sitting on the bloody bed.
The alien dropped it.
Sitting like 6 inches away. But I mean, Colborn and Remaker they're around evidence showing up all the time.
Days before the plates are even found in the vehicle, they already went through all them vehicles. Colborn himself is going through and destroying all the vehicles on the property, popping the trunks. Barb had keys for all them vehicles. They didn't bother asking, "Hey, do you have?" No, we're just gonna destroy all this shit.
And we didn't look on the back seat of the station wagon.
Not to mention they had group teams of firefighters going through the property, sweeping it prior to any of this being found. And now it all starts turning up. And there's no photos of discovery whatsoever.
Yeah.
The bones, the plates.
I do think they probably thought Stephen had done it. So they aren't framing him.
No, because on the morning of the 7th, they're talking in dispatch. They're probably going to wrap up at the end of the day and be done searching the whole property, and then Cuss Road happens. The same day
Cuss Road.
That's also the same day that they apply and get the search warrant signed for the DNA and fingerprints and palm prints, but they wait 2 days to submit them. They obviously tried submitting it to Earl, but he was hiding. Barb and Steven come to the property, and Uyghur and Fassbender escort Barb in to get some keys. Why didn't they serve the search warrants then? No, they wait till the next day.
And the next day is when they find bones. Yep.
Well, but they might not have had the search warrants fully processed, right?
Oh, they were signed. You can hear in dispatch.
On the 7th?
On the 7th, they send the officer. You hear it's all there. All you guys got to do is listen to it.
Well, and like I said, on the 8th, when you have all those officers on the property, a mixture of both Manitowoc and Calumet folks, and Jost comes across the quote unquote bone, the piece of spinal column or whatever it was.
Officer Mignon stated that the dog looked like it was having problems going to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. So, now we have this discovery of what could be a human body. So, or part remains of a human body. So from an honest standard cop perspective, everything right then stops. Everything stops.
Right.
And protocol kicks into place for shutting it down, closing off, establishing who's going to have access, who's not going to have access, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
When none of that happens, like I said, some honest cop that had to be around there would have stopped and said, wait a minute, why isn't this happening? And I don't know who would have been able to give that person a good reason for why that wasn't happening. So that's why, I'm struggling with how did the planting take place without other people being involved with it other than just Manitowoc folks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think at night it tended to be that the Calumet people left duties to Manitowoc at night to watch things. And I think that's how it got in trouble. Now, what happened at the burn pit was after they found the bone and they were going to go get it processed. I think they did cordon it off with barrier tape, and somebody put a blue tarp over the top of it because they were worried about the weather, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's some pictures we have of it in that state where I think it's waiting for somebody to bring in a crime scene team. But then they decide to start processing it without a good crime scene team.
Oh.
And they try to keep the coroner away, and anthropologists that the coroner would have called in. They keep all those people away.
Yeah.
And we don't know who in the police made that decision. But
nope.
But that likely had to be a command decision, right?
Well, yeah, because who kept her out? Who threatened her?
Yeah, it had to be. I think it had to be at least
Peterson.
Pagel.
Probably Peterson.
Well, it was Peterson. Peterson's the one that threatened her.
Yeah, it was definitely Peterson. He was the sheriff at the time.
Who wasn't supposed to be involved in this case at all, right?
Because he retired, right. And then Colborn and
then
Herman
they start
sheriff.
Then they start processing the scene with people who aren't trained to do it. And then they ask Hurdle for sibs or something.
One of the dispatchers that's manning the phones at Calumet County, one of the officers calls in. His name's Chris Wendorf. He was one answering the phones. They ask him, why aren't you out here? You're well enough trained to be helping with this. He says, I don't know. They just keep putting me on phones. I spent a total of 4 hours out there. Well, he ended up quitting the sheriff's department to go work for another department shortly after this investigation.
Right. So he saw irregularities, and
it's like everybody that played ball moved up in ranks and.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how big the Calumet Sheriff's Office is. I think Manitowoc was like 25 people, but they're pretty small police departments.
Well, like Pagel calling saying, I need anybody. I don't care. You can get the janitor. I'll deputize him. I need somebody to follow this car to the crime lab. That's when they're taking the skidster and the golf cart to the crime lab. I just find it straight. Like, he wanted to keep the same people. One of the officers there for 36 hours straight. How are you able to do something productive with no sleep? I don't care how much coffee you drink.
Trust me, you can't.
Well,
I
can tell you from firsthand experience that that's not happening.
You start getting delusional.
If you're trying to get to see hallucinations from sleep
I would
deprivation.
rather drive drunk than drive tired.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't do either.
Well, here's
Don't promote that.
I don't drink.
Here's
I can't promote it at all.
here's another little tidbit that I don't think most people have thought about. So I was with the sheriff's department. Ask me how many times the actual sheriff got involved in a case.
Every time?
Zero.
Wow.
The actual sheriff himself, that's a political position. The sheriff doesn't do investigating. If it's a huge,
then why is Jerry Pagel personally inserting himself? He's the one that goes gets Teresa's shoes on the 7th.
Yeah,
meets
Pagel and Peterson,
Well,
both of them.
That's just like Peters or Kosarik in Stephen's first case. He should have never been at that hospital in charge of the investigation with Peggy Bernstein.
Well, payback
So
for
this
the
is
Morris.
a cycle with Manitowoc.
Yeah.
But I would love to get my hands on this audio they will now release. The jail calls, the car ride with Stephen Avery to the hospital, from the hospital to Two Rivers Police Department. From what I hear, they were being real nasty to him after they left the police station.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that.
I would love to hear it. Fassbender's got it in his report. There's cassette tapes, but they won't release them.
Oh, probably because they're gone. You're not going to keep something like that around.
Yeah.
There would have been an unfortunate accident.
I just find it strange that Fassbender also took Dolores Avery's audio interview into safekeeping along with the CD.
Yeah, that's unheard of. That was another thing that blew my mind.
Well,
Yeah.
they kept information of Stephen Avery's 85 case in the safe in the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
They're talking about him in the depositions. I wish I could see the whole, because reading the transcript is not the same of watching, because you get to see their mannerisms, how they're reacting to the questions. Just the little snippets we have seen that are out there, especially Roars, which is like 40 seconds. And what does he say? Well, what do you want me to say? The evidence pretty much speaks for itself. We're fucked.
Yeah. So here's a question for the group. Does law enforcement know who the killer is?
I don't think so. I think they think it's Stephen Avery. I think that's the reason they're fighting, is they still think it is.
The only way they'd be able to frame Avery 100% is if they knew exactly what happened to her.
And that's where I was going to go with that, because if you go through the whole framing plan and plan all the items, do everything you do, and say it gets to the trial stage, you're about to start trial, and all of a sudden the actual killer comes out for some strange reason and just says, he didn't do that. I'm the one that did this. You're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think the only way, again, with the talking about them having confidence that what they're about to do is going to work, is they would have to have knowledge of and even possible control of the actual killer, because otherwise you have that hanging over your head that somebody could possibly come out and knock down your whole plan by revealing what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to control that. How did they,
Well, if they did do that, then there's an awful lot going on that we just don't have evidence of yet.
Yep.
That's why they're hiding. Like Jerry Bruning, I asked him, did he hear Bobby Dassey's, or is there a Mike Osmondson recording? He said he don't recall, but he does remember listening to some of Bobby's stuff. I said, okay, can you answer me this? Why are phone calls between Steve and Avery sealed before Teresa Halbach even goes missing? His response was, I don't see why they're sealing things if they're 100% positive that they got the right individual. Unless they're hiding something. Which they are.
Yeah.
Well, on Manitowoc's end, I don't think they really care if they've got the right person or not. I don't feel Manitowoc does.
If the 85 cases in
if it were a family member
Yeah, but it's Calumet that's not releasing it. They took the
Right.
evidence because John Dietering was given the cell phone audio and the landline audio of Stephen Avery's to Dietering personally.
Well,
Who wants, but who, they already know what's happened once with Stephen. They already have watched it unfold with Stephen getting, released for something he didn't do. They don't want to be in the same position. So they're going to do whatever it takes to keep Stephen in. And I mean, DNA is what got him out the last time. The only way that it's going to come out is if Kathleen gets him out, or if A23, is then we find out who that belongs to, or everything is so convoluted, and the lack of follow through and
The lack of reports, the lack of documentation.
Plain deception. The lack of follow through and deception is what's muddied this case so much that you really cannot say for sure anybody did it.
Yeah, Ripperjack made a good point a couple of lives ago when he said, at the end of the day, nobody's going to be tried and convicted for this crime, even if Steve Avery gets out, because they screwed it up so bad that even a half-assed defense lawyer like Kaczynski could get somebody off, because there's the chain of custody on most of the evidence is shot. Mm-hmm. The lack of actual investigation shot. So even if Casey gets him out, even if the real killer were to come forward, it's still not going to happen. What I think would, the best scenario I can see is getting Stephen out is going to take somebody in the inner circle that knew exactly what was going on flipping.
Now, the other thing with the police is they may be guilty of a lot of things other than the murder that's causing them to have the cover-up. So there's a lot of irregularities. Maybe they just know about the evidence planning that police did, and that would be enough that they would be doing a cover-up. They don't have to have committed murder.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I said it's very hard for me to make the leap to a member of law enforcement actually committing the murder. I think they stumbled upon it somehow.
I think they took advantage of the situation.
Yes. But then it comes back to how did they stumble upon it, and then how, and that's why I kind of asked, do we think they knew who the killer was? Because if they stumbled upon it, they would have had to have figured out how it happened, because again, they would have to control that person so that person didn't come out later and ruin the whole thing. So, yeah, this case is maddening.
Yeah, I think the actual mystery of the case is still there, and
100%.
There's so much of the case not investigated.
But leads not followed up. Like when Leo Richmond calls. Like when Leo R calls on the 5th, she's still just a missing person. He states that Uyghur says, I'm sure that's not the case. Just write it down. I'll check it when I get back to the office. But then they send a DCI there 2 days later on the 7th. They sent them to all the surrounding neighbors. It's like they were keeping them busy because they were trying to keep them away from Cuss Road. The fact that Wisconsin State Patrol doesn't even end up on Cuss Road till the afternoon. They won't let Loof in. They don't bring Loof in till the next day. There's a 32-page dog report. We only got 2 pages of it. And Faust was on the property on the 9th. Do you think she showed up and didn't bring her dog? I mean, that's also the same day at the AudioVox phone and Colborn's at the turnaround. Why are they there? Somebody called in a tip. Howard Thielen calls in because his neighbor is scared because the news just showed up and he knows about seeing a car there. He got several sightings of a RAV4 at the turnaround, including Robert Fabian, which then changes his story when they talk to him on the 30th of November. Now it's not a green vehicle, it's a blue one, and it's a Jeep. Everybody that, everybody they talk to, they try to get to change their story or say something negative about Stephen Avery.
Yeah, they were very systematic in how they went about it. I mean, that's probably the deception and the framing part they did tremendously. I mean, that was picture perfect. But the fact was, because they did such a piss poor job on the investigation part, it put the light on everything they did for the framing piece, which makes it believable. You had something you were going to throw in there, Magilla?
Yeah, so you're sort of coming up with the rational cop model, and like if you look at the Colborn and Lank and Remaker squad, and probably Peterson's in that group, and Bushman. But what you're saying, it doesn't seem to be genius, but it does seem to be somebody who's at least in command and competent. So who is that guy? And it's not Colborn for sure.
No, it's not Colborn.
Yeah, but who is the guy that is? They're sort of screwing up the steps. But if they did find the person who committed the murder and decide this is an opportunity to get out of the $36 million mess, who's the guy who's calling the steps and getting them to do those things?
Historic.
You think Historic?
Peg launched.
Well, I don't know. Pegel's.
No,
Pegel's,
not Pegel. Peg Lautenslaughter. That's who's responsible.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I mean, why do they insert DCI Deb Strauss, the one that was the investigator to what Stephen Avery was claiming, then they say, oh, the witness identified the wrong person. We didn't frame nobody.
Well, I come up to what kind of probably who I think is one of the main players from a command standpoint is, who is it high up in the MTSO that hates Stephen Avery, hates him with a passion? Peterson.
Yeah.
So and Peterson has a very brash personality. He's a tough guy, and lots of people are afraid of Ken Peterson. Just look at the coroner. So, although Peterson doesn't have the ultimate power like Peg would have had, I can see him operating in function of making the ultimate call, but with some kind of backing and support from either Peg or somebody high in the state.
But the same players,
that's how I see it.
The same players in Manitowoc are involved in Ricky Hotsletter's case too.
Yes, exactly.
It's like Peterson and Kasurk were like, okay, we got you out of a situation. Now it's your turn to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yeah, Therick talked about that. His talk on the Hofstetter case and how he felt it really reflected on the modus operandi of that whole group of people.
So how do they drive around collecting evidence and then you take it home?
Yeah. Well, and that's the Hostetler case is what convinces me that Manitowoc is easily capable of what they did on the Avery case.
100%. I agree with you.
It's the exact same thing.
It's tragic what happened to Ricky.
Very. Yeah, and the fact that it's very likely a member of the sheriff's department that killed him.
And you got the same players. Both the Herman brothers. Bushman's involved.
Colborn, Lank.
Bushman was a dispatch commander back then. Same position that Andrew Colborn had in 2005. And why did they bring Bushman back in for 9.5 hours?
Exactly. And where was he assigned to?
Group A, searching the west side of the Avery property. They're broken into 4 groups: A, B, C, and D. B, C, and D were all Calumet County officers manning the team, and Bushman was leader of Team A. And
wasn't Bushman put in charge of the Kuss Road operation?
Yeah, he was Team A. Yeah. That's the quadrant of the area they were searching.
And Braun brought up a very good point that, on that day, they have Bushman, who is a canine expert. He knows how these dogs are going to react. He knows what watch for. He knows what to deter them from. He knows the whole shebang.
Yeah. Well, and you asked why Bushman was brought in, because Bushman is one of their guys.
Yeah.
To be trusted.
Well, it's just like the 04 fire of Barb's Blazer. Michael Bushman is the final officer that touches that investigation, and nothing comes of it. Bobby Dassey's alibi is never verified. You know where he's with? Take a guess.
Mike O.
Goose hunting.
Uh,
He's the first one to arrive home on the property, and he's the last one to come home. Barb gets dropped off by Tom Yonda. He leaves to go to Menards. She then has to go to the store, goes to use the Blazer that her and Steven, only ones that had keys. Blazer's gone. A half hour later, Steven pulls up in his Cadillac with Jody. Why didn't she just say, hey, do you have your key? She obviously noticed her key was missing because she didn't report the Blazer missing until after it was reported on fire.
Yeah, we have a lot of rabbit holes that all of us have gone down at one point or another on this case.
Oh yeah.
And something I keep coming back to is thinking about the level of intelligence of the people we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Even in law enforcement, none of these people are the sharpest knife in the drawer or the brightest bulbs. None of them have the intellectual or training capacity to pull off a complex crime like we're almost painting it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was a lot simpler than we think it is. I think a lot of it was, I mentioned this in chat, I think during somebody's live, is I think a lot of this was done on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were kind of flying by their pants at them around, and they had to adjust. So I think there was probably a basic plan once they discovered the either the body or discovered some aspect of the murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with a basic plan of how they're going to make it happen, and then just kind of adjusted as they went. That's why it's so screwed up. That's why they had to basically eliminate following even the most basic of law enforcement protocols.
One of the things that Kelly has said to me, and it's actually gotten a bunch of us thinking, is we have to decide at some point, is this Teresa's story or is this Steven's story? Because there's two different aspects there. If it's Teresa's story, then who wanted to kill Teresa and why? And then if it's Steven's story, the scenario is completely different. And it may be that we're just missing everything because it's Teresa's story and we're looking at Steven's story.
The only connection to Stephen, Avery, and Teresa is the photo shoots. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know her. But she had been to that property several times, and every time she came, Bobby Dassey was home. Who's to say when he's talking on the stand, he's not describing what happened a different time? Like the time that the bus driver seen her taking pictures at the end of the road when she dropped off the boys. Maybe he's seen her come to his house after she took the pictures. We don't know.
Yeah.
Now there's a proper investigation done, and they're hiding things left and right.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Especially when every seasoned investigator knows that most murders are committed by somebody family, ex,
unless it's a robbery,
spouse.
Then it's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of rare. In terms of this.
Oh yeah, in terms of what they say happened to Teresa Halbach.
Yeah.
But we have no scientific proof of what they say actually took place. If you look at the crime scene, that doesn't exist. No. I mean, Brendan's charged with it happening one way, and Steven's charged with it happening another way. Yeah, how is that possible?
Yeah. So when if we think about it in terms of like reality said, if this was Teresa's story, and you look at how the behaviors and the actions of Hillegas and Blodorn, very sketchy. The things they say, kind of what they do, doesn't make any sense. Ryan moving into her house,
Oh yeah,
taking
and like
control
I
of
just
her.
posted a audio clip from the 7th, which is roughly an hour after they leave the Avery property. Scott and Ryan Hillegas is calling the sheriff's department because I got a receipt that I need to get to you guys, and they're like, "Well, you can just run it on over." He's like, "Oh, can I fax it to you? Oh, I'm actually her roommate." No, you're not. And
So
then
yeah,
in the morning of the 7th, they find out that Scott and Teresa had a sexual relationship. It's right there in the audio. You hear Wiegert say it in the background. That's why you got to listen to this audio. You have to listen to what's going on in the background because that's what the most important stuff is. And that's why Manitowoc fucked up. Because why is Andrew Colborn on the 7th saying Teresa Hallbach west of Avery's? And
So
where's Cuss Road? West of Avery's.
So what were you saying?
Oh, I was gonna say, so when we think in terms, I don't know what happened to my video, but um, if we think in terms of Teresa's story, we've got, like I mentioned, we've got the RH or Hillegas and Blodorn, acting the way they're acting, saying the kind of things they're saying, having access to the Avery property, for Christ's sakes. I don't know how that happened, but they did. So there's certainly plenty of circumstantial circumstances that make that a plausible case. But then we also have, because Millbilly mentioned she's been to this property many times, and Bobby's always been around. And then if we look at
What about Mike?
Well, there's also that
because Mike has gone and made that statement at the beginning of it that has made a lot of people question when he's talking about the grieving process.
Yeah.
Yes, when he's talking about the grieving process, when she hasn't even been missing
exactly.
for 24
who's to
hours,
say that?
and then he inserts himself as being the talker when he's got a brother who's an attorney. Why isn't he the spokesperson?
Yeah, good points.
And he's always with Ryan, and he's calling Ryan on the day of the 4th. He's calling him before his phone starts dropping all those calls. He's calling him afterwards.
That's why I like when they're interviewing Mike and Ryan on the 11th, and they say, "Well, we know you were on the property on the 5th," and Ryan's like, "Oh, no, I was never.
You were never on the property."
And Mike's like, "The fuck? He was on the property.
Yeah.
It's documented. He's on the sign-in and sign-out sheets twice on the same day. Both Scott and Ryan both come. Actually, they sign in at like 8:58 in the morning. They're there for roughly an hour. They don't sign back in later in the day in the afternoon, but they're signing out per the civilian logs. Which I don't know if that's on Jambo Creek or Q, because they don't state. Just like the Michigan ambulance leaving, or Manitowoc ambulance, when it's leaving, but they don't say who's in the vehicle.
So if you're going with Ryan and Scott, or just Ryan, do you think that Mike has some kind of idea that's going on here? Or Mike is involved?
I think the Hallbachs were hoodwinked.
Well, so again, from an investigator standpoint, you also know that it's a huge red flag when somebody starts referring to somebody in the past tense when there's nothing to indicate that person is actually dead. So that's huge to me, and that's why I've kept saying that the family is not off the hook for me from some kind of involvement. I don't know what level. I don't know whether law enforcement told them surreptitiously.
We know Steven did this, and we're going to make him pay.
Yeah, or something.
For that.
They've got evidence that she's dead. They might have told him.
Yeah.
But when they find their car, we got Mike interview. Yeah, we found her car. There's no signs of foul play. She's still just a missing person.
Yeah. Yep.
But is that what the cops are telling him? Because we don't know.
Yeah, we have no idea. And going back to the Hallbach family, all this stuff has been happening in the last couple of years, and KZ has raised some very valid, very powerful points about things that were wrong in this case. If that was me, if Teresa was a member of my family,
I'd be raising a hell.
I'd be asking some damn questions.
That's like when they bring Brendan through the courtroom. Instead of bringing him like the back door like they should, they marched him right through the hallway, in front of everybody, brought him in the same doors everybody walked through.
Yeah.
Why is Karen Hallbach laughing when she walks by him? If
Yeah.
that was my kid that was murdered and the murderer's walking, I'd have to be restrained.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, look at the
Yeah,
Larry
so-
Nassar case. Look at how the father reacted. He tried attacking him in the courtroom.
Yep.
And his kid's still alive. Now your kid's been murdered, and you're gonna laugh when they walk past him in shackles. It's not right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's just a lot of things about the Hallbacks that are off-putting to me, and people keep talking about, well, people grieve in different ways and all this, and yeah, but absolute silence when all of these questions have been raised, not seen normally.
No, it's different grieving when somebody dies from like natural causes or a car accident or something, but when they're murdered, that's a completely different scenario. I had one of my best friend's sisters was murdered in 1992, and I still haven't got over it yet. And it's how many years later? 2 decades, almost 3.
Yeah. So when I think about, okay, let's put the murder on the RH side of things. So whether it's Ryan that did it, which would probably be our best guess if we were going to put it on that group.
Right.
Then LE or law enforcement somehow discovers the murder. Again, whether they just find the body, whether they find him in the act. I mean, who knows? Who knows how that occurred? But at some point, law enforcement becomes knowledgeable of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
How do we then bring in the Avery Dassey family? Because they don't need Scott, they don't need Bobby in order to frame Stephen. They don't, because they've got access to the salvage yard without those two. So how does Scott and Bobby become involved in this to a point where they're both lying their asses off to the investigators and to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I also can't make a connection on. Bobby's one thing. When you watch Bobby on the stand, he seems very meek, unsure of himself, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Todick, hell no. Scott Todick is on that stand. He's confident. He's actually joyful to give the testimony he's giving. That was not somebody being manipulated. He was very happy.
Why does he hate Stephen so much?
Exactly. Yeah.
Supposedly they don't even hardly know each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
He says something that he's so happy, and when the verdict comes in too.
Oh yeah, look at the still pictures of, I think it was Brendan's guilty verdict. He's smiling.
But I think he said this is the greatest thing that's ever happened or something when Stephen was found guilty. So
yep.
And that doesn't make sense.
Another side of the thing that we got Bradley Check. We got several of Teresa's friends calling Calumet Dispatch, asking them to look at Bradley.
Yeah.
And that's after they talked to him too. They still phone calls keep coming in.
Yeah. So I was going to say, let's reverse it now. Let's say it was, we'll go with Bobby. We'll say Bobby committed the murder.
Yeah.
And again, law enforcement becomes knowledgeable of it somehow, sets up the plan. Using that scenario, how does RH and all of them come into the factor then?
Well, so I have a story for that, at least a working theory. So the night of the 3rd, when they say they're doing all this planning, what really happens is they go search the yard themselves. Hell, if I'm going to sit there, my sister's been missing for 3 days and just work up a plan for the next day. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, you got to find out, if we can find out who put the flyer up in Manitowoc at the Senex, because it's there, because we got a dispatch call. Officer Ryan from Two Rivers Police Department, I believe, calls in and says, hey, I've seen these missing posters here at the Senex. I heard there's a dead girl that died this morning. Is this anywhere connected? And the dispatcher says no, because that was my neighbor.
It
So
was
we
involved.
got Mike Hallbach. He's on the news on the 3rd. He's south of Manitowoc at a bar handing out flyers. So who went north?
Well, in my working theory, it's Ryan,
Me too.
and he has to find the RAV4 on the perimeter of the yard.
Well, what do we? Who is that in the background of the Colborn call saying the car's here?
I don't believe the Colborn call is him finding a car. I'm going back. There was a guy named Canuck 64 who came up with the earlier dispatch call where a similar voice was in the room, and I'm just not convinced that call is all this much of a smoking gun that Colborn saw the car that night.
Why does
Well-
Manitowoc have her car in their custody and her kidnapped on the 3rd?
I don't believe they do.
And it's got to be after, because when Colborn runs the information, she's already listed as a missing person.
Well,
So
it's 9:20 p.m. on the 3rd, and they were told it's
that's the
6:37.
problem. The audio is not time stamped whatsoever. We don't
There's
know
a-
when things happen. Dude, they edited the audio. There's no audio at all for the 4th, and just so happens that their dispatch log coincides with the audio we have. They edited it.
All right, it could be all falsified.
Yeah. Well, didn't somebody determine that even though there was no timestamps or anything on the calls, they were stupid enough to keep them in the order they came in,
Yeah,
and they were
that's
able
true.
to compare that by who was, sitting at dispatch at the time?
It's the offer
And the
transmissions
dispatch
that are,
entries.
like the
Yeah.
lack of audio for the transmissions between officers doesn't make any sense either, because they're recording that all the time.
Yeah.
Every time
So,
a dispatcher takes their shift, they put their tape in the machine, so they record everything while they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, the CAD system does a lot of that stuff automatically. Well, it does now. I can't recall if it did back then, but if going back to the Colburn call, the reason I have to say that he was actually at the car is because he had just come back from a meeting with the whole group, not an hour and a half before this call.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going with the time it took place on the 3rd,
Yeah.
he had gotten the information from a credible detective. So there would be no reason for him to have to call dispatch to verify information he got from a detective. There would be no reason to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened to Colburn, again, because he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, he fell into muscle memory habit. He stumbled upon the car, and what does every cop do when they stumble upon something like on a traffic stop or anything like that, or a suspicious vehicle?
Run the plate.
Trained to call in the plate. So I think he screwed up. The only thing he did, that I'll say is quote unquote smart, was he didn't call it over the radio,
Mm-hmm.
because then everybody would have heard it. He actually took his cell phone out,
And that's
and
probably
made the
why,
call that
because
way.
then everybody else would have heard it.
Right. So he knew he was doing something wrong, but it's my belief, based on my training and how we call in things like that, is he was at the car.
Yep. And he doesn't give his report or account of talking to Stephen and Avery until 8 months after, when he's instructed to, when they do their summer report.
Well, he could be at the car at the old Mishcot Dan turnaround.
Yeah, that sounds very true. Yeah, where Rambo saw it.
Yeah, and he could call it in then, and that could be before they go to Zippers. I think there's plenty of time, because he's just coming from the sheriff's office. He goes to a church across from Zippers and waits for the other guys to show up.
Yep, but none of them are together. You got Dieterine asking Colborn if he has a cell phone.
Colborn's alone.
You got Jacobs. I know none of them are together, though. You got Jacobs calling in to see if they got in the house yet. Remaker's by himself because he calls in and says, Andy, you know what that play comes back to? Negative. So none of them are together.
Yeah.
Right,
Where is Link? Where's Link this whole time? That's the problem.
Was it Ripperjack that said he's got somebody cleaning up that audio? Somebody said they got
Nobody
somebody
does.
working on that.
Hillbilly.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting because it's tough to rule out somebody talking in the background. The problem is because people were talking about it before the audio came out. It's there's almost a slight element of confirmation bias come in when you're listening to it, because now you have to hear it because somebody already said it's there.
Yeah. Well, it's
it's
like on the 9th when they call Dr. Cott to come remove Bear. In the background, you hear him say, "Once we get that dog removed," and the officer's walking away, so you can't hear what he says after that. But they're obviously talking about getting the dog removed, so the dog is at the burn pit still. Yeah. And they didn't come and get Bear till the evening of the 9th. And that's 2:11 p.m. We get that phone call about them finding bones in the quarry. You got to expand the crime scene. But how are they finding bones with no dogs?
Yeah. Well, Joe stumbles upon it.
I'm talking about the bones that are located in the quarry, away from the Avery property.
Oh, yeah.
How are they finding those with no dogs? That's why we're missing 30 pages of the 32-page report.
Yeah.
There's so much, like, no matter which part of this case you look at, like, you look at the trial, jury was tampered with, 100%.
Yeah.
Remaker got a slap on the hand. Now he's the head of the Drug Metro Squad. Jennifer Bass, she got disciplined even more. And she was also with Wendy Baldwin when they decided to burn the mannequin without the sheriff's names on it.
Oh, yeah. Good old Wendy.
What prompted her to do that? That's what I would like to know.
Yeah.
Because she was up and coming. She just got hired at Calumet. You hear in the audio when they're going up for the flyover, the new chick is going up with Pagel. She was actually en route to the Hallbox residence to retrieve some evidence. They tell her, no, meet Pagel at the airport. And then they go up in the video. Just like she's going through the house talking about, oh, I bet you all these shoes could collect us some crimes. But, yeah.
Anything interesting going on in chat?
Just Ryan. Link Colborn actually agreeing with what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many holes and so many different strings that have to get attached. But I feel pretty confident that at this point, the only reason nobody has flipped yet is because all the major players, I think, feel pretty confident that the way the system is going to continue to protect them. It's going to take KZ getting a hearing of some kind or a favorable ruling from
they got a
Court of
scapegoat
Appeals.
Though. They could blame this on Jacobs.
Oh no, they'll blame it on Colborn.
Jacobs is
brought
dead.
up the day planner.
Blame it on
The day
Jacobs.
planner too.
Oh yeah,
because that writing from Steve about Sheboygan, she had that with her in order to write that down.
Well, her call with her friend Debbie as well for her appointment at 1:00.
Right.
For I think the next day or something it was. Yeah. She was
that Denise
or
Diane.
Was it Denise? Diane.
Denise
Diane. But the thing is, if you look and one of I don't remember if it was Calf or Justin that brought it up. The one with Steve though, the one with Denise is written in the line, so that could have been done at a desk.
Well, because remember the affidavit from
right, but it looks like it could have been done on a desk. But the one from Steve is written on the side like you would do if you're in a car or something. You just pull it out and write it on the side of it.
Yeah.
That's really telling because it's not written all nice and neat in the lines. It's like you pulled the paper out and wrote as you were going.
Oh, not to mention that you see a photo of a for sale sign tucked away on the side of the desk, and you see the marker, and now you see the sign, and the marker that they use is sitting right there. But yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
someone's asking what killed Jacobs.
What killed Jacobs? I believe it was a heart attack.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say it was natural causes.
Where did Teresa buy her RAV4? That was at Lemieux.
in Green Bay. If you watch
Yes.
my video, there's a dispatch call where the salesman
About
at
the sticker.
the salesman at the Green Bay Lemieux dealership called because previous customers had been being harassed by somebody, and they thought it may be connected with Teresa too. So I don't know. There's lots of things, lots of tips that were called in, and they weren't followed up.
And that was one of the things that Pam used to try to determine it was Teresa's, was the Lemieux sticker on it.
Yeah.
And Rieger was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, let's not even.
One says dead men don't talk.
Yeah, let's not even talk about Pam of God. I mean, that's a discussion all in itself, right?
But if that car was being shoved into that lot on the 5th, like Sowinsky says, then Pam of God was led by the Holy Spirit, and Ryan couldn't have told her where it was. That's why I think the day has to be wrong.
It just bothered me that Earl let 2 people on the property to search, and he says he let them drive in. But when they're interviewing him in the interview on the 9th, that they say happened 2 days after it did, he's saying he's never let anybody drive on the property. But then in trial, he testified he did let 2 people drive into the lot. He doesn't recall them leaving, but that was shortly before Pam and Nicole showed up.
What date was Stacy Seabrook wants to know what date the laser was burnt?
September 24th, 2004. 2 days prior to this, there was a welfare check on the Dassey residence and also a sexual assault investigation by the Two Rivers Police Department. I've tried FOIAing them for both reports. They have no luck.
So I have a question for McGilla and Sapper. So you both totally don't even give a thought or a passing possibility of the German being involved or Andre Martinez?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't fit the MO for Martinez, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, the German thing was just so outlandish. It didn't even approach the realm of feasibility.
Mm-hmm.
So Martinez, though, he was on the property the morning of the RAV was found.
He was also on the property on the 31st.
Yes, he was on the property on the 31st as well.
And
there's
I find it funny
the possibility that Siebert saw 2 vehicles going in. What if one of those was Charlene Edwards, and then he's on the property on the 5th, and he sees the cops coming? Is he thinking, man, she's called the cops, she's said something, and that's why he goes over there and
we won't know. She's dead.
Well, she's dead, yes, but we also don't have Skurlinski's interview.
Yeah,
Skurlinski's interview of Andre Martinez, because of course DCI, we can't get it.
Well, I guess my question would be is, how does he know Teresa's there? How does he know Teresa?
We don't know.
I guess that, yeah, those would be 2 questions I would probably.
I mean, he changed the story.
Those are things that would have been found out if they did a proper investigation.
We also got Pam Sturm saying there's 3 men speaking Spanish nearby when she's finding the RAV4.
Yeah.
And that sounds like Andre.
Well, his own son, I actually have his arrest record, and his own son puts him at least trying to get into Avery's salvage yard on the 5th, his own son. Apparently his son's car had been towed there and he was trying to retrieve it. That's what he told police.
The car that they have in Avery's property was completely totaled. I got a photo of it.
But there might have been something in it that Andre didn't want to lose.
Well, it wasn't Andre's, it was his son's.
Yeah, but he could have had something in it like drugs or a gun.
True. I mean,
didn't.
Andre, and one of the things that was fascinating to me is, you know, how everybody says that the VIN number in Teresa's was tampered with. Well, in the report, one of Andre's friends comes over to his girlfriend's house, and he's got this black Blazer, and he's wanting to get rid of it. And she's like, well, you know, why do you want to get rid of it? And he's like, well, I bought it from Andre, and, you know, I don't need it. So, you know, I paid him $250 for it. She calls the cops, and the cops are going, well, you know, can you give us the VIN number or the plate number? And she's like, well, there's no plate number. And then they're like, well, can you give us the VIN? And she goes to look, and lo and behold, the VIN is popped out of the front of the windshield. So there's no VIN on this vehicle as well.
No, the RAV4, the VIN plate was a little bit unusual, but it hadn't really been tampered with. It just, the printing on it was at an angle. And that had to have happened at the factory. There's no way to do that.
Well,
after.
I thought everything pointed to it being unreadable.
I thought Remaker said
We
that
have photographs of it now.
Remaker said it was tampered with.
He said it moved. While he was looking at the VIN number through the windshield, it moved by itself.
Well, maybe the adhesive had been worn off. But we do have two photographs of it close up, and the numbers are hard to read.
They took photos of the little hula girl, and you can see in every individual fiber, but they can't take a legible photo of a goddamn VIN number. Not to mention, there's multiple different places you could take a picture of it.
Yeah,
they ripped the seat out underneath the passenger seat.
VIN that is the only one that.
Yeah, but Zellner gets the car.
Okay, Sam?
Cut him off.
If Zellner
It
gets
looks
the car,
like he's falling on his side, but I guess.
Why won't they give her the car then?
Well, they were about to, if we're to believe, you know, Fallon and folks,
And
which still throws me, because I've said it before that RAV is a pot of gold to KZ, and giving the RAV over,
it will destroy their case.
Their case is done. So I almost want to think, you know, I hate to think of it this way, you know, with Judge Suckett that's being involved in the whole thing, but I feel like they already knew somehow what Suck was going to rule, so they kind of fake an agreement, you know, make KZ think she's going to get all this, and then bam, here comes Judge Angie's ruling. I find it hard to believe they were just going to willfully give the RAV over.
I agree.
Yeah. Lulu is agreeing with me that Remaker thought that it had been tampered with.
Yeah, but in trial, he stated that the VIN moved.
We just recently got the close-up photos.
There's they blurry.
One's
you can't make out all the numbers. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's very hard to read, but you know, it's on the inside of the windshield, and the sticker's there, and the numbers aren't printed on the sticker in the right place.
Yeah, and
so
like I said, there's
multiple
different areas of the car they could get the VIN off of. Why?
Yeah, there's at least 4 spots on a vehicle where the VIN is.
Inside the fender, on the RAV4, inside the fender, on the passenger side, underneath the carpet on the seat where the jack is placed, the VIN's stamped there. It's stamped on the motor. It's stamped on the tranny. It's stamped on the chassis.
I didn't hear anybody saying they had trouble reading it any place but the windshield. And
well, there's no.
Well, that's what I mean. If they couldn't get the one on the windshield to be legible, they could have went to one of the other spots and took a picture of that, but they didn't.
Oh, they had the VIN once it went to the lab. It's Pam Sturm who couldn't, and she wasn't supposed to touch the car. So
yeah,
they supposedly had a lot of things when the RAV went to the lab that don't quite pan out.
No, but I mean, they had the VIN. They got it. They had to have it because they had a key made.
Like, we got all these photos of the items that they retrieved from her vehicle, but we don't have photos of them discovering everything. That is the problem with this whole case. There's no documentation of discovery whatsoever.
Yeah, I kind of, and that's kind of what I talk about with the whole law enforcement thing and everybody being comfortable with each other is, there was no Serpico in this case. How does that happen? You have three separate agencies involved in this thing, and you don't have one cop who has the Serpico trait.
Well, and Cap brought up something good the other day too. She said, and someone just asked about it in here. Ryan inserted himself in with the headlight big time because nobody else knows the damage. Nobody else knew about
that was after
insurance report.
But that was after KZ came out with her brief, and then they opened the Queso 2PO to try to debunk or validate what Zellner was saying. So he didn't really insert himself. They interviewed all her friends trying to get anybody to confirm that the damage on her vehicle was there. None of the people that she's seen that day said there was damage on her vehicle.
Well, and he concocted this story about the insurance company, which...
Yeah. And the insurance company said there was never any such
claim.
So why is he the only one?
Then they questioned him about it. They questioned him about it in 2017, and he says he doesn't remember anything.
Yeah.
Well, even better than that is he claims she made the claim on the headlight, and which, knowing that if she went so far as to make a claim for a windshield wiper blade, she would have made a claim for the headlight had it happened. So,
but also it was a turn signal. I mean, you can get pulled over for not having.
So, and why does he know about it? And her family saw her the day before, and they didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, and nor is it listed on the missing poster.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think it was more like when Fassbender's first report comes out,
and
he had an opportunity to ask him about it, and Ryan volunteered to go find out about it, and got back to him a few days later. So Ryan volunteers again to insert himself in the investigation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another red flag.
Yeah.
Flags.
I definitely, other than the Sowinsky evidence, Ryan's my guy.
I just got a problem with people denying being on the property when they know they were, and the cops ignore it.
Yep.
So, according to one, I'm not sure if you're referring to the headlight or not, but he says, careful. Ryan did say that he knew, he said he was told by friends and family. He's like, who?
No, in 2017, they asked him who did he talk to, and he said he didn't remember. It's like in the 2017 interview with Dietering, he didn't remember anything.
We just got that Scott and Barb interview from DCI back then. Can we get any more? Like I said, y'all get a FOIA approved, hit me up. I will pay for it. Gladly. But I'd like to thank you all for joining this discussion, and would like to do it again. Any other topic is open discussion. Talk about whatever you want. Just keep talking till they're walking. And that's what I'm going to do. Well,
thanks, everybody.
And y'all have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Got to go back to the jungle here.